So often in life, especially in our professional lives, when we are learning something new, we often use similes like a duck paddling, like a fish swimming, like a bird taking flight. And we often try to use these to illustrate a point that something is going to come about naturally. Well, we know that that is not always the case. We're humans. We can't fly. It takes us a while to learn how to swim, and we have to crawl and let alone learn to walk. So the similes sometimes are a bit disingenuous and offer a little bit of false hope. But that's why we get together with these videos and teach you something. Because when we tell you to scan in the air traffic control environment, sometimes you get really confused. If you remember our last video, I made the introduction where you look at the trainer, you look at the person next to you, you look at the clock, you look at the supervisor, you look at the door to the break room, you look at the exit sign, and you look at the janitor, all looking for a sense of hope. Maybe they can signal you to do something about your scan. Well, it's not always that easy. So since it does not come organically and air traffic controllers are not made overnight, we have no similes here today, and we are going to teach you the simple plan to scan. That is the title of today's presentation, a beautiful view of the island of Puerto Rico there at the Roosevelt Roads Naval Installation. And today we are focusing on subtle hints, tricks, and suggested techniques to help you make the most of your radar display scan. Now, this is geared towards the radar trainee. We will not be scanning strips today, and we will just be focusing on the radar display as we see it. So remember that there are multiple things that we scan: the radar display, the strips, and the time clock, and any other pertinent areas like the IDS and any other items that might require our attention, but we are focusing on purely the radar display and focusing on how to perfect that. Those other items we've dealt with in other videos, and we can deal with them with videos in the future, but today we are focusing on the radar scan. Steve here, so happy that you're here, happy to be back with you. Let's get to it. Let's get to that bulleted list. Welcome back. Will scan for food. That's today's bulleted list title. And as a developmental, you will scan for food. Now, you often see air traffic control saying they will vector for food. Well, one day we'll put the two together and make quite the concept of will scan and vector for food, because that's quite the bargain. So, scanning with a purpose, again, no surprise there. If you remember our first video, A More Perfect Scan, we did very broad generalizations when it comes to scanning, looking for work to do, both from the radar associate position, scanning the display with a purpose, and also the radar position. And we also kind of talked about how we have multiple sources to scan. And I kind of just talked about that last slide. UTC time clock, the radar display, the strip bay, the printer, the IDS, the information display system. Maybe you have a piece of paper that has special routes on it or a signet. So there are a lot of possibilities and lots of sources for us to scan. But like I said, focusing on the radar today, we are quick focus and shift to next pending items with a sense of order and focus. So moving on, taking a look what can be done, and then moving on in quite the fashion. Develop a technique that works for you. We're going to have one suggested technique today, but it's a technique that is kind of tried and true, and it kind of gives you a sense of structure to base maybe your techniques as you progress in your training. Examine some tools, this is exciting, that you can apply to given scenarios in your scan. So without further ado, let's get to the sector. We're focusing on sectors 2 and 8 today, because that is where you will be, whether you are starting the class or maybe it will be your first radar sector that you focus on. In subsequent videos, we can shift to the 4 and 6 environment, but let it be understood now that this scanning is a universal concept. So you can take this with you to the 4 and 6 and 2 and 8 and still grab something and take away from this presentation. So let's get to the sector. Ready, set, jets, go. I will see you there. Did you know if you did a digital scan of the 7110 for the word scan, you would only get 28 results, and like 2 of them happen to be an example using the call sign Scandinavian, so that counts for 2 of them. So as you see, our governing document doesn't really even provide that much guidance or fundamental instruction on how to scan. It is up to you to develop it as a developmental controller, and it's up to your training team to help guide you and seek out the easy option and help you develop your own if that be the case, and to be successful with it. So whatever technique that you are going to continue and grow with, you should Try to do it consistently and apply it to every situation. With that being said, you see how we have made the jump to the Sector 2 and 8 environment with a prudent number of targets. We didn't want to give you too many targets and have you kind of be overwhelmed with lots and lots of situations, things pending, things cooking, things you might have to babysit. We are laying down the fundamental concept here today with this amount of targets. But luckily, each of these targets, whether they're in pairs or singular, need something done to them or something is pending with them. Now, we do not have the strips for context, but I'll provide to you the context because, like we said, we're focusing on the radar display and the strips are just in pretend being there. So with that being said, today's technique that we are presenting you is starting clockwise, and in this case, starting with American 1392. Perfect. A St. Thomas Lander American 1392 is, and as you see, that aircraft is not quite in R2's airspace. So look what we have to scan for. We can either call and get control, which we could, and we've discussed that, but let's pretend that we are waiting for this aircraft to be in our airspace because that's the whole purpose of scanning. We will have to get back to American 1392 because they are not quite in our airspace for the JES restriction at 1000. Quebec 8 Oscar November Echo, flight level 170 southeast bound on the Blue 520. And we have Spirit Wings 100. Looks like we already talked to the aircraft and assigned them 16,000 or flight level 160 temporarily because of the traffic situation there. So perfect. Look, we have two things pending here, emerging target procedure, and when separation exists, Spirit Wings 100's climb. Keep up with the clock. We have goal 7832 and goal 7834. Now you might be wondering what exactly is cooking there. Well, if we had the strips there, these two particular aircraft do land Punta Cana and they are proceeding direct SATO now. And as per the LOA with Santo Domingo, now that we have radar procedures, we have to ensure 10 miles of separation. Now looking at it from a quick eyeball perspective, that is not quite 10 miles. So we have to use a speed restriction to ensure that we will get the necessary required spacing between those two aircraft at SETO being 10 miles apart, also at flight level 180 or descending to. Moving on to KLM 743, there's a couple of things that we might be able to do to this aircraft. One, are they radar identified yet and on the strip? No, not quite. So we're waiting for them to call us. We have to verify the route east of 60 degrees west. And we also have to give a merging target procedure, possibly, because they're at 35, perfectly sandwiched between the two goals at 34 and 36 respectively. And also maybe to help out R4, we can get the estimate for O-bike, Mach number and requested altitude. So perfect. Start up there and look, we have a sequence at Aguadilla and Teal 22 is on a 290 downwind heading at 7,000 and flight 7120 is on what appears to be almost like a 360 heading. Maybe there was traffic that they were following, maybe they requested that vector specifically, but we understand that and flight 7120, maybe we just sat down and it was the last controller's intention to have them go first and Teal 22 to follow them. So what are we trying to do? Well, we might want to get Amflight 7120 lower and maybe have Teal 22 start looking for Amflight 7120 to complete the sequence. So we will star those guys, and as you see here, we would return back to American 1392. Now, I'm timing this slide, and so far we've been talking for almost 4 minutes and 40 seconds. And as you see, we completed this scan. And what exactly you have to do is start back over, because in the course of the time it took us to brief ourselves on each of these targets, we've had about maybe 2 minutes pass. And the idea that these aircraft are not frozen in time, it's moving pictures, that's the beauty of the radar, and they are one step closer to, for you, or you are one step closer to giving them what they need. American 1392's restriction, the merging target procedure climbing, do something with the goals, do something with the KLM, and solve your sequence at Aguadilla. So how can we do this? Well, that's what we will discuss on the next slide. We will introduce some tools and some instructions, some techniques to help you get your job done. So I'll see you at the next slide now that we've talked about what's been done, and we'll bounce right off this point. Stay tuned. One of the most underrated and most used tools that Micro eArts has for us, or any other radar system, at least in the in-route environment, because ERAM has such a function too, is the beauty of the vector length. Now, we have talked many times and seen many presentations that included radar targets, but we never really discussed the radar vector length, because they've always just been arbitrarily placed there and taken for granted. So it's about time we discuss it and we make it a part of our scan. So this video is facilitating the perfect opportunity for us to do so, because we just got back from the sector where we were moving in a clockwise fashion and looking at how many things that we had to do that were pending because we could not do them now. We can't, unless we get control for American 1392, we can't give them their jets restriction. We can't have Spirit Wings climb yet because you have Quebec 8 Oscar November Echo there. And take it back to the sequence we have at Aguadilla. For example, we cannot turn the teal and place it behind the AMP flight yet because we don't have the separation. We don't want to cut the aircraft off. We don't want to cut AMP flight 7120 off with teal. So as you saw there, we had vector lengths, and that helps us decide when we can start doing these items. And if you go back to the two goals too, we're going to show you a different tool altogether, but also the vector lengths show you that they are going to be in unison, slight overtake on the goal that is slightly behind as they make their way towards Sato. So the vector lengths paint the picture on what will happen, and it helps you in your projection, and we are all about projection. But as you see here, we have conveniently placed a generic radar target, TAM 8186. We show you the Micro eArts keyboard here, perfect, the generic symbol there, and here is our data display area where it talks about a whole bunch of different things. It's almost like the sector heading if it was a paper. It's telling you that the fuse target, it's showing you who's on D2, it's showing you who's on R2. I believe this is the time. I cannot recall what exactly this is. It's going to give you your limited data block altitude filter, which is awesome. It is set, and there is what we are focusing on right now, the vector length. Vector equals, and we have two X's for our numerical value in minutes. Now going here, it's quite awesome. You will find the vector length right above your numeric keypad on the far right side. It kind of has little guards in terms of these little elevations that kind of fence in so you can actually find it with your fingers. And there it is. You hit the vector length key, you have 1 minute, 2, 4, and 10. So as you see there, this is what it looks like, and it'll cycle through it. 1, 2, 4, and 10. And actually, it'll cycle to 0 too, where we started from, because as you notice, TAM did not have any vector length in the first place. And if we properly scan and we understand, if we want to know and set up a sense of context where we are with our vector lengths, we can always look at our display data area, and that would populate as 1, 2, 4, and 10 as well. It will move simultaneously with the length. So just in case if you were to sit down, maybe it's somebody else's settings, or you are looking at a zoomed up portion as we have done in the northwest corner of Sector 8 or right around the Dandy area, and you want some context to where these targets are, you hit the vector length and there you go. You immediately know where the Micro eArts is projecting the aircraft to be in 1, 2, 4, or 10 minutes. And then you can maybe sign in and get your bearings. But this is one great way that you are able to understand the context and understand how much time you have until you can do things, right? We have a lot of things pending here in our little traffic situation. So the vector length is one of those awesome tools to say, hey, this is what you can expect to do in 10, 4, 2, 1, and obviously in real time. So wonderful job. You see how we busted out the keyboard there for your learning pleasure, and we took a look at the vector lengths, also known as the stabbers, the swords, the lightning bolts, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. They have a whole bunch of cool monikers. So let's go to the next tool. I think you'll like this one just as much as the vector length, so I will see you there. Another awesome bell and whistle that Micro eArts provide is your separation list. And the separation list is a wonderful and convenient thing that when you use it, you can make it a part of your scan. Say if you had maybe twice the aircraft that you see on here. Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. So if you had 16 aircraft on frequency and inside your sector, and these 8 aircraft all needed something done. Maybe the other 8 are overflights where, they're just hello, goodbye aircraft. But you have 8 things that you have to do, as we discussed in the initial slide. The more tools you have and the more things to scan for, to brighten and focus your eyes to say, hey, this needs done, well, you're all the better. So here is such a tool, and it's a tool I like to use, especially when we are talking about sequencing aircraft, whether it's sequencing for an arrival fix such as Vetus, Beano, or Sailor, or possibly Slugo, or when you have a mandated separation standard that is beyond normal, right? We are 5 miles here in the en route environment, but sometimes maybe Miami needs in-trail spacing. You need in-trail spacing over your inbound fixes, as we have talked about before, especially over Slugo. So how do we do this, and where are we applying it to? Well, the goals, as I suggested that we had something cooking, a special tool for the goals, we understand that we need 10 miles of separation between these 2 aircraft, and they will both make a descent to flight level 180 as per the Santo Domingo and San Juan letter of agreement, and we know that they're kind of sandwiched, or more or less, and we need something where we do not always have to constantly look and try to train our eyes to see what exactly 10 miles looks like on microEARTs. Now, that would be to your benefit to learn what 10 miles looks like on microEARTs and what it looks like on your settings, whether you're working Sector 8 by itself or here in the 2 and 8 environment. But something to help you out until you perfect that is the list, because you can make it a part of your scan. And here's what I'll talk about. First off is display function, and not a multifunction. Multifunction that we often use, and it has its own key right there, and it is catacorner and diagonally placed from multifunction. So you hit display function, and how you know it is different is because you get DF that will auto-populate your message composition area as opposed to MF. And sure enough, you're going to hit S. Think of S for separation. Boom. And then you are going to slew and enter on the 2 targets that you would like to get a continuous distance readout on. So you click, you can only have 2 pairs, but you can have more than, you can only have 2 aircraft in a given list, but you can have multiple entries in your table, and sure enough, it'll populate as table 1 and goal 7832 and goal 7834, and it's showing you 4.2 nautical miles between them. Now, when it comes time to give the aircraft their respective crossing clearances, and you need to achieve a certain distance, in this case we are aiming for 10 miles of separation for Santo Domingo, you will be able to play around with your speed. Maybe you set a Mach number right now, or a speed in the transition when the aircraft start to descend. But now you have something that makes up your scan. As you scan from, oh look, goal 7832 and goal 7834, they're moving along quite nicely. Maybe you sign one, maybe do not exceed Mach 0.78, maintain Mach 0.79 or greater. You start realizing your 10 miles, you have quite a distance to achieve it. If you're able to focus, oh look, KLM 743, we're gonna give traffic. Amflight 7120, start their descent, have teal looking for, maybe slow teal down a little bit. As American 1392 makes it closer to your boundary, you're gearing up for that crossing restriction, and you are also taking a look at Quebec 8 Oscar November Echo and Spirit Wings 100. As you see, we are staying in the clockwise fashion, but look what we also get the scan for. We have our separation list. So even though I make my way back to goal 7832 and I see that little bit of black background of the radar in between the 2 targets, those 2 eye tags, I can see what exactly it is when I look at the separation list. And I will know that I can stop or possibly even increase whatever measure, whatever clearance I have taken to achieve that 10 miles. And there it is, another item to say, hey, this is what you are working with. So as you see here, it is a quick kind of impromptu, quick fundamental on how you move your eyes and you find what work needs to be done and when you can do it. And if we were able to flash forward and fast forward this scenario into the future, maybe 2 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes, we would be able to get a lot of this stuff done. Now, if you would like to pause the video and practice your phraseology, because there's a lot of things that we can get done here with not quite so much with American, but with the Saab and the A321 there over Juliana, your situation with your SATO-bound aircraft, your situation with the MILOC aircraft, and your sequence at Aguadilla and move back. And you see it's a continuous cycle. Watching, reconciling, maybe 30 seconds goes by. That means that American 1392 is 30 seconds more close to the boundary, and you are that much closer to giving the restriction. And as you make your way back to AmFlight 7120 and Teal 22, you are that much closer to solving your Aguadilla sequence and getting things where you need them to be to have a successful session. So that is basically it. We introduced 2 tools and some techniques, the clockwise techniques, and always focusing on the targets. Don't focus on one thing too long. Keep moving, because chances are once you take a look at something and you complete one scan, there will at least be one thing that you will be able to complete, and check that off the list until it requires your attention or another clearance or something like that. But if you are constantly moving in a clockwise fashion and scanning and reconciling and moving on and not focusing too long, you'll be able to find some other work to do. And sure enough, if you keep that technique and you are really sold, if you sell yourself on that technique, then you know that you will get back to that point where you'll be able to give that clearance, because you're going to oftentimes be like, hey, you know what, oh, man, I really want to get this American down, and you complete a scan. Okay, you're not quite there yet. And maybe even 3 scans later, and that aircraft is still not quite inside your airspace, but that's okay, because if you trust the process and you really, really understand and go with the flow with your technique and being patient, you'll get back to that and you'll get American down. You'll solve all of these pending traffic situations. Just trust the process and try to consistently apply your technique. Find a technique and rock with it. And that's basically it. So I'll see you at the next slide, for the send-off. Great job today, guys. Really proud of you. Great job today, everybody, with that. I hope that you've taken something away from the introduction of techniques and maybe getting the gears going on being okay with leaving things to do and trusting yourself from moving from one item to the next and knowing that you'll get back to that item in your next scan. And if you can do that consistently, it doesn't matter if you have 4 airplanes or 40 airplanes. If you can stick with that and just hold that technique near and dear to you and adhere it and apply it to every situation, well, you're golden, and you will have a wonderful, wonderful experience through the training process and applying it as a CPC or a certified individual on that position. So with that being said, fantastic job. Thanks again for spending time with me today. Just remember, the road ahead is your path to glory. And by glory, I mean wonderful career here as a CPC here at San Juan or at any other facility as you make your way through your career. So like I said, always enjoy this time that we spend together talking a little shop, wonderful views, a little bit of fun, tools, techniques, concepts. We're having a blast. So Steve here, wishing you nothing but the best. Keep those attitudes just like that, separation, positive, and I will see you at the next presentation. Take care now.